One of the most memorable moments in recent horror for me would have to be the Gordy's Home section from Jordan Peele's Nope, particularly due to the analog aesthetic, something I utilize in my own videos, obviously, but more so due to the uneasy feeling I got watching the section where Gordy goes on a rampage in the soundstage. It's not only a well-executed sequence on a technical level, but there was something more primal to it that unsettled me, something that felt a little too plausible. A wild animal just deciding to do what it does best. And looking back on that scene got me thinking about how we don't really get films about this kind of horror anymore. Natural horror is the name of the subgenre, and it's defined as a horror film that features natural forces, typically in the form of animals or plants, that pose a threat to human characters. And some of the greatest horror films of the past fall within this subgenre, but I grew up during cable television, so natural horror means a whole different thing to me. Instead of incredibly directed classics, I got Sharknado, Two-Headed Shark Attack, or the classic Mega Shark vs. Crocosaurus. Now, I'm not here to be the millionth person to dunk on the absurd amount of terrible shark movies there are, but I will probably be the 6th or 7th person to talk about this absolutely insane primate movie. A movie that is so laughably bad at points, but at the same time was able to somehow evoke that same primal fear I was searching for, by utilizing some very real danger. And there is one specific scene that was the catalyst for me making this video. I'm Nightmare Movies, and buckle up because today we're going to be talking about the 1990s cult classic, Shakma. If you ever wondered how a movie should start, it should go something like this. Anyway, getting into the actual plot, this is Dr. Sorensen, and he's performing an operation for his medical students to see, one that we're going to learn has dangerous consequences as the film goes on. But that's not really what's important right now. What is important is the game that they're going to be playing tonight that one of his students mentions. We shift to a computer lab somewhere else in the building and get introduced to Sam and Bradley setting up said game. And I know I'm already pausing, but I just want to point out something about Bradley. I'm not sure if it was direction he was given or a lack of it, but the way Bradley talks this entire film makes this feel less like a serious horror film and more like it's porn parody.
Game master.
Too bad you're gonna lose tonight.
Never happened before.
Now, while the sexual tension between Sam and Bradley is almost too much to handle, we unfortunately have a movie to get back to. So Sam, Bradley, and a couple more of their friends are putting together a game of Dungeons & Dragons to play all across their campus's medical building, utilizing tracking equipment and walkie-talkies that can only communicate between a player and
the game master.
Bradley and Sam are prepared for a pretty fun night, but unfortunately this was our title sequence. Now is about the time where we get introduced to the body bags of the story and some actually important characters, namely Richie, Gary, and Sam's girlfriend Tracy, and rolling into the lab on a metal tray is the titular Shakma, a baboon who has been injected with a modified version of corticotropin, a hormone that inhibits aggression, but according to Richie it can sometimes have the opposite effect. And do you want to guess if it does? If you really need a hint? I also want to add that not only did they inject this primate with an aggression hormone, they also chose a baboon, which according to Richie is the most aggressive primate on planet Earth. And just as we learn all of this information, I'm gonna pause again for a second to address this. Yes, this is a real baboon that they're using, and fun fact, it's the same baboon, Typhoon, who was used in David Cronenberg's The Fly. Now obviously they didn't use Typhoon for every sequence. They did utilize some pretty good practical effects for some of the other parts of the film. But part of the horror you're gonna see later comes from the fact that Typhoon is a very real presence in this film. After sedating Shakma, Dr. Sorensen comes in to scold our students and instructs Sam to put Shakma down. Sam, unfortunately for the rest of our cast, has an emotional attachment to Shakma and isn't exactly thrilled at the idea. But they are all thrilled once again about their game tonight. Sam, Tracy, and Richie all discuss their roles and plans for it. As they discuss the game, Sam reaches for a vial that reads phenothiazine, an antipsychotic, but mistakenly grabs one labeled phenethylamphetamine, something that I don't actually think exists, but that's okay. Sam enters the room where Shakma is being held, injects the medicine to kill him supposedly, and Richie kindly offers to take care of the rest by cremating Shakma. Luckily though for us, Dr. Sorensen is quick to keep this movie going and says he has to perform a necropsy on Shakma. A necropsy that can apparently just wait until tomorrow, stopping Richie from just chucking Shakma into the incinerator. So they lock him up in this room with all the other animals. Richie and Sorensen leave with Shakma untied and not realizing that they just made the biggest mistake of their lives. Now the next part of this film is simple setup for the oh so important game we keep hearing about. Part of that setup is introducing us to Richie's girlfriend Laura and his younger sister Kim, and part of it that they don't know about is that Shakma has awoken. And there's this genuinely freaky shot of the room he's locked in, where all we hear is crying from the other animals in the room as Shakma presumably rips them apart. And with that, the game has really begun. Here's the setup for the game. There are clues and keys scattered all across the building that our medical students need to search for to rescue the princess. Sorensen has locked everyone in for quote-unquote security, and of course, all of the lights in the rooms will be turned off. And wandering the halls is the group's nemesis. No one is leaving this building without a rescued princess and a demon slain. And with that, the group sets off on their missions, but not before Kim gives Sam an ulterior motive, a secret gift if he rescues her. And this is all setting up a really weird love triangle that doesn't really go anywhere, but that's okay. The next little bit is the group exploring the halls of the medical building and
The Game Master.
giving them instructions. Everyone seems to be having a wonderful time, especially my favorite character, Bradley, who refuses to do anything but sensually whisper into the radio. But just as you're probably thinking nothing is going on, Bradley enters the primate room. He seductively tells
The Game Master.
that he thinks he hears Nemesis in the room. The only problem is, Nemesis is in room 414. He runs into the room where they were holding Shakma, throws some glitter, and discovers a massacre. All of the cages in the room are either opened or filled with viscera of the other lab animals. And even though Bradley's character takes me out of anything serious this movie might be trying to do, this is undeniably a gruesome and unsettling image. Bradley turns around, but just before he can leave, Shakma pounces on him, and we can only guess what he does to Brad. For some reason, this causes Brad's transmitter to go offline, so Sorensen sends Richie over to check it out. He walks in and finds Brad's walkie-talkie on the ground, covered in blood. And soon, he finds Brad as well, lying on the ground with his throat ripped open. Brad hears Shakma screeching and quickly locks himself in a nearby storage closet, as Shakma throws himself at the door. Eventually, Shakma's attacks stop, and Richie assumes that the coast might be clear enough to go out and grab the walkie-talkie. He grabs a cup of hydrochloric acid as a weapon for some reason, and then really slowly exits the room instead of just sprinting out and grabbing the walkie-talkie, giving Shakma the perfect opportunity to pounce and take another one of our players out of the game. Now it's time to take a break from the carnage and get back to the important stuff. Sam and his love triangle plotline luckily don't take up too much screen time, but I want to just point out that this movie makes the strangest tonal choices. Like, they really want to have some serious horror moments, but then you get a scene like this. But as I said, it doesn't last too long before we get back to the actual plot. Our
Game Master
is now worried that two of his players are no longer responding, so he decides to go investigate. He locks the elevator door to keep it open and makes his way to the primate room. There, he discovers a horrifying scene. Richie's corpse lies motionless on the ground as his face slowly melts away from the hydrochloric acid he was carrying. It really is grisly and graphic, but it's kind of ruined by Dr. Sorensen's bizarre performance. He just gently puts his hands on Richie's chest, almost like he's checking if this man with half a face is still alive. And then he gives this shocked or taken aback kind of look. I don't know exactly what he's doing here, but regardless, once again, one of our characters slowly walks away instead of sprinting as Sorensen heads back to the elevator. Sorensen is almost there when he suddenly hears a growl. He turns and sees at the end of the hall Shakma standing there in the darkness. Sorensen tries to get the elevator working again, but it's too late. Shakma sprints down the hall and jumps on him, leaving only 4 more people left in the game.
The Game Master.
At this point, Sam and Tracy have become aware that something is going on in this building. So together, they investigate and try and figure out what's happening. And soon enough, Sam finds the culprit. This weirdly tense scene plays out where Sam has a standoff with Shakma. He tries to calm the animal down, but that doesn't really work. Shakma charges and Sam and Tracy just barely make it to the staircase. Shakma violently throws himself at the door, and watching this, I do genuinely feel worried for a second. It's the way this animal's only objective is to break down this door. In a pretty goofy movie up until this point, it's a shocking sight, and I would say that this is a huge tonal shift for the movie. The tail end of this film is all about getting everyone out of this building. Shakma is seen back in the primate room munching on one of the corpses, and we get even more moments of him bouncing off the walls and ferociously chasing after the characters and slamming into doors. The sound design in moments especially disturbs me. It's this layered, visceral screeching that Shakma makes when he attacks, and for all the cheese, this still does work incredibly well sometimes. Now, as for an escape plan, unfortunately for Sam and Tracy, Dr. Sorensen thought it would be a great idea to lock this place down like a prison to play a simple game of D&D. All of the rooms specifically with phones in them are locked and there's no way out of this building. Also, all of the fire alarms are shut off, so the only way out is by finding his keys and unlocking an exit. So Sam and Tracy initiate the Scooby-Doo plan to go search for the keys and gather the surviving members of the game. And this is where we get a particularly horrifying scene, the one I mentioned earlier. Still wandering around the building, completely oblivious to everything, is Gary. Meanwhile, Tracy is able to change the frequency on her walkie and contact him. Gary hops in the elevator conveniently where all of Sorensen's keys are, and is making his way up to the 6th floor where Tracy is. She begs him to get out of the elevator, but it's too late. It stops at the floor below, and Shakma gets to Gary. The elevator then opens on Tracy's floor, and all she can do is watch as Shakma tears Gary's face apart. And there's this particular shot of Shakma's mouth dripping with Gary's blood and moves on to Tracy that was the main reason I wanted to cover this movie. It's so simple, but it's such a horrific image, seeing an animal just act how an animal would. Tracy runs and locks herself in the bathroom, trying to evade Shakma, but all she really did was corner herself. With nowhere else to go, Tracy tries to escape through the vent, but Shakma immediately puts an end to that plan, leaving only 2 of our players left alive.
Double kill.
Eventually, Sam is able to rendezvous with Kim, who, despite hearing all of the commotion, just decided to stay in her room. And her whole justification for this is that Sam didn't say the passcode that she needed to open the door. Moving on, together they get some knives to defend themselves. They're still looking for those keys to get out. And this is where we do get probably the silliest part of this movie. Do you remember Richie's girlfriend that I mentioned earlier, Laura? Well, it turns out that she has been sitting in her car outside this entire time, just waiting for Richie to finish his game. And Sam and Kim actually notice her. Now, I want to give you guys a little multiple choice question here. If you and your friends were being killed off by a hyper-aggressive baboon and you needed to get someone's attention, would you A, break the window above the air conditioner and start throwing shit at her car? B, if that's not possible, find another window in this absolutely gigantic building? Or C, throw silverware at the car and miss multiple times? If you chose C, do what my good friend the horror geek would say, and
give yourself a screenwriter's credit.
Now, while that plan goes horribly wrong, eventually leading to Laura just driving off, Sam unfortunately discovers the corpse of Tracy. He breaks down in the bathroom and soon after carries her to the elevator to place her next to Gary's corpse. And I know the movie really wants to insist that this is a dramatic moment, but I really just could not take it seriously. Luckily for Sam though, right next to Gary are the keys to him and Kim's safety, and all they need to do is call for help. So with that, Sam makes his way back to Kim, but sadly, it looks like Shakma's going to get to her first. Every single one of Sam's friends are dead, but he has the keys to safety. He enters Dr. Sorensen's office and calls the police. But this wouldn't be a great movie without one final showdown, man versus wild. Because of course that's how this movie is going to end. In one of the most hysterically absurd endings I think I've ever seen in a movie. Sam has a standoff against Shakma in the primate room. Shakma, in slow motion of course, darts at him, leaps to finish off his last victim, but is ultimately tricked. Shakma smashes through a mirror Sam had set up in front of the incinerator, and Sam slams it shut, burning Shakma alive. Sam then falls to the floor, and the last lines he repeats over and over again are just, "I win." And that was Shakma. Now, I do think there's a lot to appreciate about this film, but not necessarily in the ways the filmmakers might want you to. Again, Shakma is not a good movie by any means. Similarly to a lot of B movies, I'd say the justification for most plot points are paper thin. I mean, literally shutting off fire alarms and trapping students in a building is a crazy way to make sure they don't leave by
The Game Master.
Also, I feel like most people could probably figure out a better way to get Laura's attention. Forks and spoons really wouldn't have been my first option. And while the acting isn't super terrible by any means, the film definitely has more than its fair share of cheesy moments and dialogue. All of those things come together to give just the perfect amount of bad movie entertainment. But beyond that, there are some horror scenes that are genuinely pretty creepy, only helped by the fact that, like I mentioned earlier, there is a very real baboon involved in this movie. It's kind of intense watching this animal just wildly throw itself at doors, jump all over the set, or even just interact with the corpses. There's this feeling of unpredictability whenever Shakma is on screen, and it makes sense considering this is an actual animal they're just letting run around on set. And though it is a little funny to see how flimsy some of the doors on this set are, like you could break down most of these doors with just a little effort. When Shakma is throwing himself at them, there's a real possibility that he's going to break down that door. On top of all that, there are some effective moments of horror. The whole reason for me checking this film out in the first place was that one shot of blood just dripping out of his mouth. It's animalistic, I mean, of course it is, but in a way that makes me never want to interact with a baboon ever. Now, obviously Typhoon wasn't utilized all the time, but even when you can tell that there was a double, they do a pretty decent job at hiding it. As for the plot, I was surprised that a movie about Dungeons and Dragons and baboons got so dark. Like, they kill quite literally everyone in this film, and it's a really fun watch. I guess I could summarize the movie like this. Anything involving Shakma is brutal and sometimes horrifying. Everything else is straight comedy. Now, getting back to my original talking point with this video, we really don't see movies about this specific type of horror anymore, outside of the good people at the asylum giving us shark movies every other week. These natural horrors can be so effective and so simple, and before CGI, this was sometimes the only way to make those types of movies. Hire a trainer and get a real animal on set. And there's something wild to me about that. Movies like this, or Grizzly, or even Snakes on a Plane, with all of their flaws, still have a leg up on a lot of other horrors because of their use of real animals. And even good examples like Candyman, or even something like Indiana Jones, elevate themselves in this way that's almost impossible to replicate with CGI. Now I say almost because my example at the beginning was an excellent exception to that. Nope utilized the incredible talents of Terry Notary, the man who is the CGI monkey in just about every movie you see now. It's something he's fully dedicated his acting career to, and I have to give him full credit. Planet of the Apes actually put out some fun videos of him explaining his process for these roles, and it's a fascinating watch if you're actually interested. Nowadays, I don't think there's a need for safety to be compromised for the sake of authenticity, but looking back at movies that had to utilize real animals is always fascinating. There are some legendary movies and stories that made use of animals, and there are some even more terrible and insane ones that did the exact same. If you want a brutally fun baboon B movie, I don't think there's anything better to recommend than Shakma. I had a blast with it, and I hope you do too. And with all that being said, thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'm Nightmare Movies, and I'll see you all next time.